Every leader who has survived long enough to reach the C-suite has done so by developing a dominant style. A way of making decisions, building relationships, and responding to uncertainty that works well enough, consistently enough, to justify the title. The problem is not the dominant style. The problem is what the dominant style builds around itself over time. A leader who leads from analytical precision recruits people who value analytical precision. A leader who leads from decisive execution builds a culture that rewards decisive execution. Over years, the organization begins to reflect the leader's dominant strengths back at them. The leadership team agrees, the culture reinforces, the blind spots compound. The leader who will not survive the AI era is not a weak leader. In many cases, they are exactly the kind of leader their organization has rewarded for decades. Decisive, analytical, execution-focused, driven by urgency and numbers. The problem is not who they are. It is the architecture they have built around themselves. This module is not about personality. It is about architecture. 4 things you will take from this module: how a dominant operating style builds an organization in its own image and why that becomes dangerous now; which leadership capabilities AI has already automated and which remain irreducibly human; the 5 architecture failures the AI era will exploit with precision, and the 4 components of the architecture that survives. I went through a psychometric framework called Insights Discovery, built on Carl Jung's theory of psychological types. It maps how people operate through 4 color energies: decisive fiery red, analytical cool blue, creative sunshine yellow, and empathetic earth green. In one leadership session I attended, I was the only participant whose dominant energy was yellow. The room was heavily red and blue. Green was present but low. What that room had built collectively and without designing it that way was a leadership culture optimized for speed and analysis. Very good at deciding, very good at measuring, and structurally under-equipped for the things yellow sees: the relational signals, the cultural undercurrents, the unspoken concerns that determine whether a decision lands or fails. The room did not lack intelligence. It lacked balance. And the imbalance was invisible precisely because the culture rewarded the strengths that dominated it. That imbalance is survivable in a stable market. In the AI era, it is not. AI now handles the red and blue capabilities at a scale and speed no human team can match. Execution, prioritization, and process automation without fatigue. Data processed faster than any analyst, synthesized into structured output at a depth no individual can replicate. The organization that built itself around execution speed and analytical depth has just had its primary competitive advantage democratized. What remains as the differentiator is exactly what that room had underdeveloped: the yellow and green layer. The creative judgment, the cultural reading, the empathy, and the vision to build something the data cannot show you yet. Put a number on the exposure. Of the 4 color energies, the 2 that built most executive careers, decisive red and analytical blue, are the 2 AI has already automated. This is not a forecast of what AI will eventually do. It describes what AI is doing now in organizations that have deployed it. The leader who recognizes this and builds for it survives. The leader who doubles down on red and blue because that is what has always worked does not. So here are the 2 architectures. The one that fails has 5 structural vulnerabilities, and none of them are personal. A leadership team that agrees with you because years of selection have filtered out the perspectives that challenge the dominant style. A culture that punishes failure, which guarantees the organization stops experimenting at exactly the moment the market demands it most. A planning cycle that looks backward, allocating resources to what worked last year rather than what the market is becoming. A technology strategy that is tool-oriented rather than architecture-oriented, significant investment with no compounding return, and a definition of intelligence that is individual rather than organizational. The smartest person in the room, governing accordingly, is a single point of failure in an era that requires distributed intelligence. The architecture that survives has 4 components. A leadership team that carries genuine diversity of operating style, cognitive and behavioral diversity as a strategic asset, not a metric. A culture that treats intelligent failure as a learning event, because the organizations that compound their advantage are the ones that iterate fastest. A planning cycle where leading indicators carry at least equal weight with historical performance in every resource allocation decision. And a governance architecture that distributes intelligence rather than concentrating it. The leader who survives is not the one with all 4 energies in perfect balance. It is the one who has built the architecture that compensates for what they individually cannot do. Early in my career at Alcatel-Lucent, I argued against pushing telephony inventory into channel partners to hit a quarterly number. What the leadership heard was someone who did not understand the business. What I was defending was the channel itself. Years of distributor trust traded for 1/4 of inventory. The inventory went in, the relationship started to deteriorate, and I was encouraged to move to another part of the organization. The capability that made me a misfit in that environment eventually got me hired at Barco to lead the Asia Pacific go-to-market transformation for ClickShare. The Barco regional VP leader was execution-focused and analytically sharp, but he was smart enough to know what he did not have. He brought in a complementary perspective, and he listened to it. That contrast is the argument of this module made operational. So, to close, your dominant style builds the organization in its own image, and the blind spots compound. AI has automated the red and blue advantage, so the differentiator has moved to the human layer. The 5 failures are architectural, not personal, and complementarity, the deliberate recruitment and governance of the intelligence you lack, is no longer a cultural preference. It is a competitive determinant. This closes block 1. You now hold the complete diagnosis, what the AI era is doing to organizations, why this disruption is different in kind, and the leadership architecture it will and will not reward. The next module opens the framework that resolves it, the 6 intelligences of the leadership intelligence stack, and why these 6. That is where the program begins in earnest. I will see you there.